I'm sure all of you on this call are familiar with, with our methodology, but I will just jump into it initially. I won't go into too much depth. I'm sure you are very familiar with this, but essentially it revolves around these three elements. So basic human needs, macro trends, and innovations. We believe that when big societal shifts like an aging population, growing inequality, and so on, brush up against basic human needs, it creates a tension, and that tension is then resolved by innovation. So products, services, campaigns, or business concepts that are meeting those basic needs in new ways. Now, why am I reminding you of this? Well, because in 2025, we expect to see some big shifts at that macro trend level. So let's start by just looking at a few. So first up, AI and robotics, no surprise here. This is actually an image in the background from BMW Group's factory in Spartanburg, Germany, where they are testing out the efficacy of humanoid robots on their production line. But more specifically, we're going to see this surge in agentic AI, bots that can think, plan, and act on their own. So unlike chatbots, this tech could transform workflows across industries. We see early solutions like the coding agent Devin by Cognition AI. Here is their human CEO, show potential, of course. And, with over 2 billion US dollars invested in the tech, agentic AI, we expect will power a new generation of solo entrepreneurs or solopreneurs. 25% of US companies that already use generative AI are planning to launch agentic AI pilots or proofs of concept in the year ahead. Which brings us very nicely onto the future of labor, which is, of course, being radically altered by automation and economic stability. It's giving employers the upper hand. We see just 27% of consumers report being financially unscathed, and many are continuing to diversify their income streams. So that might mean reselling on Vinted or freelancing on Fiverr, for example. We also see, rising youth unemployment and uncertainty around the future of white-collar jobs will turn this gig economy into a real lifeline for the next generation. And this next generation is spawning new business models. By next generation, of course, I'm talking here about Generation Alpha. These are the kids born between 2010 and 2025, and they are set to number almost 2 billion by 2025. So the consultancy McCrindle predicts that by the end of the year, they will in fact be the largest demographic in the world. This generation are the most globally connected ever. They're navigating this time of rapid change. They're TikTok native, they're ChatGPT fluent, they even have their own somewhat incomprehensible language. I think just a couple of days ago, the Oxford Dictionary claimed brain rot as their word of the year. Will this new language help them to navigate a pandemic-scarred, increasingly polarized world? Perhaps not. The brands who engage with them meaningfully will understand this, while also empowering their potential amid the generally dystopian macro outlook. And if you weren't feeling old enough already, then allow me to make you feel incredibly old. Gen Beta is already on its way. And in fact, Generation Beta are coming sooner than this meme makes out. The first beta babies are being born less than a month from now. So that's obviously a lot of change. But what does it all mean for your brand specifically? More disruption, of course, means more opportunities for innovation. And this isn't just some aphorism that we throw out to clients. This is something that we at TrendWatching embody in practice. So rather than just talk about the rollout of generative AI, we have actually leapt at the opportunity to create some AI tools of our own. These are our trend babies. Perhaps you've seen them on our platform. They allow you to take one of our trends and see how it could be applied by your brand. So there are tools that help you craft new product ideas, shape campaigns, come up with future business scenarios. And as you're scrolling through the report, you will notice that we've added 2 of those AI-generated innovation ideas per trend. Those ideas in the report have been made using our Trend Baby tools. You'll see as well a little extra analysis from some of our trend analysts in there too. But to complement the launch of our 2025 trend report, we've actually launched 2 completely brand new tools. One that shows how each of the trends featured in the report could impact your industry, and another that shows how each of our 2025 trends might look in your particular region. Now, they're both structured very similarly, so I will just demonstrate one of these quickly now. So from the Explore page, you navigate to the Trend Baby section, and then you're going to select one of these tools, in this case, the industry application. Then simply type in your company name. So we're going to go with Tony's Chocolonely, a fantastic purposed Dutch brand. Add the URL. You can then select the industry from each of our industry categories, and you can add any additional information that might help to tailor your response. So in this case, we could add confectionery. And then you're going to select the audience that you're most interested in. So let's go for Gen Z, and we'll cover all genders. You then pick the markets you're operating in or that you're interested in exploring and hit generate. Now, it's important to note that none of your data or these ideas are stored by either TrendWatching or OpenAI. We've opted out of data sharing, so you can ideate here without fear of IP infringement. But as you see on the screen, within seconds, you will be presented with some customized reflections on the trends that feature in our report. They'll be tailored to your brand and the industry sector at large. So this and the accompanying regional tool are really fantastic ways to understand the relevance of our trends to your particular market. But before you start playing with these tools, allow me to walk you through our 2025 trends. I say walk through, it might be more of a run through because there are 7 in total, which is really too many to cover in great depth. So we're going to home in on 3, and then we're going to leap through the final 4 pretty quickly. So we have time for a couple of questions at the end. On that note, if any questions do crop up as I'm walking you through the report, do submit them using the Q&A feature, and Gemma will then select a handful to be answered at the end. So let's get going. On to our first trend, worth-wise. Now, this trend is all about rethinking how worth is generated and exchanged. With economic turbulence set to continue for the foreseeable future, our shared definition of value is shifting, and we see this in Gen Z, who are becoming increasingly disillusioned with traditional work. In response, forward-thinking brands are introducing new forms of value creation that reward consumers for their authentic participation and their strategic engagement. And you can see from this trend timeline in the report, this approach to brand loyalty is the latest iteration of a trend that we first tracked in 2010 called Reward Inc. But why do we see Worthwise taking shape now? There are 3 drivers here, or what we call why nows. Firstly, gaming platforms and social apps are changing how they reward attention. So we've seen a boom in tap to earn games like Hamster Combat on Telegram, in which players simply have to tap the screen and they earn cryptocurrency rewards. This game in particular has over 300 million players, and these types of games are starting to show up in other places too, such as on TikTok. Now, it's hard to say if this type of gameplay will stick around, but it's clear that value creation is moving beyond traditional money, and it's creating some really interesting new possibilities. Then, of course, there are financial pressures. So 30% of Gen Z, 32% of millennials feel financially insecure, half are living paycheck to paycheck. What is clear is that traditional income sources simply are not cutting it for many people. Additionally to that, around 45% have picked up side hustles. And with AI, as we've already seen, potentially further disrupting the labor market, having multiple income streams feels more important than ever. As this is happening, we're seeing these new models for creating value and loyalty systems start to take shape. And as a result of this, tied into this, consumers are also becoming more strategic about what they buy. So 57% are doing thorough research before making any purchases. Many are also thinking about factors like an item's future resale value or the availability of support after the sale. And we see some brands actually shifting their focus to long-term value. So one key example here is Vestiaire Collective, who launched this cost per wear metric for luxury goods. Now, for each trend in the report, if you haven't already taken a look through our report, you'll see 6 examples of this trend in action. I'm just going to spotlight a couple of those now. So one example we have here is On the House. Now, this is a credit card which launched in September that allows content creators in the US to pay for goods and services by posting Instagram stories instead of spending their cash. So businesses can partner up with On the House to offer cardholders a selection of different services, products, or perks on the condition that cardholders will promote them via their channels. Alternatively, in June, IKEA launched the Co-worker game in Roblox. Now, this virtual game allowed players to experience working in a virtual IKEA store. So they help customers, they can also gain promotions, and they can transfer to different departments. Now, ahead of the launch, fans who are aged over 18 and based in the UK or Ireland kind of flocked to the application process. There were thousands of applications, however, only 10 virtual roles. Now, the interesting twist here is that these roles were actually paid. So those successful applicants actually are paid £13.50 an hour, and that is IKEA's hourly rate of pay for any London co-worker. Now, there are plenty more examples to explore in the document. As you can see here, there's one by McDonald's in Singapore, there's another from Alipay. But what kind of business opportunities does this trend present? Well, firstly, there's an opportunity to really rethink your brand's value exchange. We saw IKEA experimenting with offering real wages for virtual work. Concepts like this are obviously very early days, but they hint at a future where brands build parallel economies. So where they turn participation and loyalty into tradable assets. Alternatively, how about targeting different consumer segments and rewarding them in ways that actually make their lives better or easier? On the House meets influencers on their level by acknowledging their social influence as a tradable currency, but there are plenty of other forms of capital. That could be creative, that could be intellectual, social, that could also be acknowledged or traded. So on to trend number 2, sense-scaping. Now, this trend really sits at the confluence of 2 macro trends, technological advances and the pursuit of wellness. And we've seen tech drive the emergence recently of immersive, sensory-focused experiences that are really tailored to an individual's emotional cues and physical responses. But now we're seeing those experiences evolve. So participants are actually starting to learn something about themselves in the process. What's really key with this trend is bridging the gap between data and discovery. So creating those sensorial experiences, but in a way that doesn't simply monitor users' well-being, but actually turns those insights into pathways for deeper self-knowledge. Maybe you remember our sentient spaces trend from 2019. Those of you who are long-time TrendWatching members, that was all about ambient technology, so spaces that react to human presence. As I say, now those spaces aren't just reacting and responding, but people are actually gleaning deeper insights about themselves, information they perhaps might not be aware of. There again are 3 main forces driving this trend. One is neuroaesthetics. This is an emerging discipline in cognitive neuroscience that is concerned with understanding the biological bases of aesthetic experiences. And it's making real tracks at the consumer level. So we've seen cultural encounters being reframed as health interventions, and that's tied to neuroaesthetic research, which has revealed the positive implications on a biological level. So the implications of a visit to an art gallery, how it can maybe slow cognitive decline or lower cortisol levels. And in relation to that, we've seen art prescriptions gain traction across the globe. So we're seeing this shift from art as leisure to art as therapy. And those of you who are frequently gallery visitors, whether prescribed or not, will be fully aware of the surging popularity of interactive art exhibitions in recent years. And we've seen this with artists incorporating biofeedback or extended reality or real-time responsive elements into their works. These types of technologies are enabling new forms of creative expression, and they're converting once passive viewers into active participants. This is a work that was presented at the Venice Biennale by Stefan and Nicola Blee. But this isn't just happening in galleries and museums and art fairs, whether it's brain reading headphones you can see on the screen or emotion tracking AI, a raft of non-invasive technologies are giving users greater insight into their internal states. Now, of course, much of this technology will encourage people to live more efficient, more streamlined lives. And in fact, Gartner predicts that 60% of IT workers will be using bidirectional brain-machine interfaces by 2030. But many of these technologies will also be used to help people get to understand themselves better. So turning abstract emotions into actionable insights. Let's take a look at how this trend is manifesting. So at June 2024's Art Basel, Turkish Airlines launched an art project called Inner Portraits with the artist Refik Anadol. So Anadol sent 4 people who had never traveled abroad before to new destinations and then used sensors to capture their raw emotional data in the form of heart rate, skin conductance, and EEG output, so measuring their brain waves. This information was then translated into virtual immersive experiences, which demonstrate the connection between travel and neuronal activity. So making a really fascinating exploration of the value of travel on a personal level. And then over in France, in Paris, we saw Nike create the Breath Lab. This was a digital in-store installation that invited people to step inside and engage in guided breathwork exercises. So you step inside this kind of orb-like structure, and an AI model processed breath-related data, which was captured by a thermal camera. You can see that pictured here. And it then adjusted the ambience of the orb accordingly. And this was part of a wider holistic fitness campaign launched by the brand this year, sorry, already in 2025 mentally. Instax actually approached this trend from a very different angle. So they used neuroscience to recreate lost digital memories. They worked with a doctor at Princeton Neuroscience Institute and reconstructed the memories of a woman in Sydney. So they used MRI scans to map her brain activity as she visualized specific memories, and AI algorithms then generated accurate images based on those electrical signals. And this activation was then accompanied by an exhibition of those photos, which were apparently uncannily close to the images that she had envisioned in her mind, and they were put on display in Sydney. Now, maybe those examples already have you thinking up ideas of your own. They sound really future forward, but as I've just shown, consumer brands like Instax are already acting on them. We think there's really great potential here for brands to visualize or to externalize the psychological benefits of using their products or their services or their experiences. We've seen that with Turkish Airlines. Or alternatively, could you help to highlight to consumers the times or moments when they have negative or adverse reactions to external stimuli? Can you help them to work through those issues? Of course, as we do say in the opportunities here, if you're going to jump on this trend, transparency is key. In our research, we found that over half of US consumers are uncomfortable with in-store tracking. That rises to 68% for facial emotion monitoring. So as this sort of technology goes mainstream, privacy does need to remain front of mind. Now, from clarity to glorious messiness. I mean, we are clearly big advocates of AI, if you can't tell already, but we also like to say that for every trend is a counter trend. And Humanifesto is all about rejecting that onwards drive towards AI optimization and leaning into life's imperfect moments. So as the line between the real and the AI generated blurs, celebrating the messy reality of being human is becoming a valuable way for brands to signal their authenticity. So this trend is really all about championing emotional authenticity and celebrating the complexities of everyday life. Now, why is this trend happening now? It's safe to say that we are currently gripped in what we call the AI paradox, by which I mean that big tech continues to promote AI's productivity and streamlining capabilities, But I'm sure a lot of you can agree on this call. A lot of the time, it's actually contributing to your workload. And we see it amplifying burnout. We see 77% of consumers across the US, UK, Australia, and Canada say that AI has reduced productivity and increased their workload. And alongside this, we're also seeing the emergence of silent firing. That is the term used to describe what happens when employers start quietly replacing employees with AI, which is yet another reason, of course, for workers to reject AI's kind of relentless drive for optimization. But the embrace of messiness is also a response to impossible standards that are being placed on young people. So outside of the workplace, 27% of US teens claim to be struggling with burnout, while 51% feel pressure to present themselves in a certain way. We see the Ozempic effect, stalling diversity efforts. Meanwhile, AI beauty pageants, you can see the winner of Miss AI here, are fueling unrealistic expectations around everything from personal image to relationships. Parallel to the rise of AI slop, that is a technical term, by the way, for low-grade AI content, if you're not already familiar with it. Alongside the rise of AI slop, we see authenticity and vulnerability trending online again. So you might have noticed Gen Z on TikTok are practicing rejection therapy, where they deliberately seek out awkward encounters with strangers. And many of these accounts are doing so in a bid to go viral. So in this way, we see unfiltered authenticity becoming increasingly aspirational. And this is taking hold in different ways. So we're seeing it in the form of campaigns like this campaign by Selena Gomez's Rare Beauty brand. This is the brand's first global brand campaign. And, you can see it's far from perfect, but deliberately so. We see young women laughing and connecting, which is great, but then also persevering through more difficult or uncomfortable, lonely moments. The overarching message here, of course, being to embrace every side of you. How can brands bring this idea to bricks and mortar? Well, how about creating spaces that encourage emotional release? Prior to the opening of its New York store, the fashion brand Meester turned the space into a rage room. So they filled the space with disused corporate office furniture and invited visitors to come in and smash it all to smithereens. This was in July, and obviously they did have to actually renovate the space and open the store, but the activation lives on in the form of a rage wall. So they're inviting consumers, or locals in New York, to come and write down their personal gripes or concerns on Post-its, and then they are slammed onto this big collage, kind of like a huge collective wall of anger or rage, as they call it. And we're seeing this also in product design. So this is Nonna's Cam. It's an analog camera that has one defining feature, which you can see in this image. That is a hyper-realistic finger that partially obscures the lens. And this camera was created as a personal project by a creative duo from Madrid called The Surfers. And it was inspired by the accidental mistakes of childhood photo albums. They've described the product as an antidote to flawless selfies and photoshopped pictures. Now, brands that successfully build on this trend won't simply revel in the messiness in order to enable bad consumer behavior, but rather to establish themselves as human, empathic brands. And when it comes to products like Nonna's Cam, that might mean products that are improved by their imperfections, or perhaps you think you can maybe take more of an experience angle, like Meester, and reconsider the role of bricks and mortar in a digital age. Can your stores or your physical outposts become spaces for emotional release? Okay, just a quick check-in to make sure you're still with me. I realize I'm going at breakneck pace. We are going to rattle through the next four trends a little bit more quickly even, so hold tight. So trend 4, Mirror Mirror, which some of you who might have attended our Amsterdam or Singapore events a couple of months ago may recognize. In essence, this trend stems from consumer anxiety about the future and considers how AI technology can help people to visualize tomorrow and therefore make better purchasing decisions. There are various drivers. Obviously, we've seen digital twins been used by insurers and industrial giants for years, but now we're seeing this tech get a consumer upgrade. We've also seen time and again that consumers feel overwhelmed by the sheer volume of purchasing decisions they have to make each day, and that actually making the right decision feels harder than ever. At the same time, 80% of global citizens feel the world is moving too fast, and shockingly, just 35% are optimistic about the year ahead. I say shockingly, I'm not sure actually how shocking that is really. But while we've seen that technology can obviously amplify feelings of future anxiety, how about using it to give people greater confidence in the future? This is where we see AI stepping in. There are six examples in the report. I'm just going to focus on one now. We see various brands moving on this trend. This is from the breast cancer charity Copperfield in the UK. They launched a campaign a few months ago which aimed to quash the misconception that breast cancer only affects older women. It used a filter to age a handful of young women aged between 21 and 24 who had been diagnosed with the illness, with a view to driving checkups among Gen Z. And there are so many juicy ways that brands can pick up and run with this trend, whether that's daily lifestyle simulators that can really viscerally illustrate the secondary impacts of particular lifestyle choices and help people plan for retirement or mitigate their climate impact. Alternatively, we also see great potential in AI mirrors on a personal level. So the ability to communicate and consult with a simulated older version of yourself with a view to making better purchasing decisions is also a really interesting opportunity that could be explored here. And as I say, many more opportunities and examples to delve into in the report. But we're going to move on to serendipity seekers, our fifth trend. Now, when will consumers tire of surprises? We've seen pop-up shops, mystery trips, and blind boxes show no signs of subsiding. And in fact, as AI gets better at making personalized suggestions, it's likely to fuel consumer appetite for the unknown. So this trend is all about encouraging those moments of unpredictability during an age of algorithmic certainty. Why are consumers calling out for this? Well, we've seen a growing reckoning with the cost of algorithmic convenience. Sure, you might get products, services, suggestions delivered more efficiently, but there's also the risk of becoming trapped in a feedback loop. Or maybe worse than that, perhaps you've had this experience yourself, your favorite kind of underground or niche restaurant or bar or your local hangout gets picked up by an algorithm and hideously overexposed overnight. We have seen various examples of consumers coming together in this kind of online guerrilla way to pollute the internet with fake reviews in order to save their favorite hangouts from being tourist hotspots. And then finally, of course, there's this urge to connect in real life, which we're really seeing demonstrated with the fade out of online dating apps and then the rise of book, chess, running clubs, these real opportunities to connect IRL. One example of a brand that's acting on this trend is Heineken. They aimed to bring serendipitous encounters back into live music events by creating this boring mode phone app that silences everything but essential notifications so people can really connect in person. Accompanying this at various festivals over the summer, they also had this really fun campaign where they used infrared technology to project a message onto the stage, urging people to live in the moment. Now, the only way you could actually read that message is through a camera lens. So, of course, this really targeted people who were sort of doggedly following or watching the event through their phones. So, really smart deterrent for people who are glued to their technology. Now, brands keen to work with this trend should really consider how they might engineer unexpectedness into their consumer experience. That might be rewarding consumers for shaking up their routine, might be promoting the tangential, the unexpected. Algorithms, of course, typically narrow choices. So the opportunity here is to really differentiate by designing with surprise in mind. Our sixth trend, social fabrics, is also about forging social activity. And I know this is ironic of me to say on a video call, but face-to-face interaction remains in free fall. And it's not just in professional context that is the case. In the US, teens have cut in-person social time by almost a half since 2002. While in Hong Kong, Japan, and South Korea, we see 1.5 million young people withdraw from physical contact completely. That's the hikikomori phenomenon. What is clear is that more connectivity means less connection, but anxious consumers need helpful nudges or stepping stones to really help them get out into the real world again. This trend is being propelled by a social deficit among Gen Z, nearly half of whom feel more nervous talking to new people compared to 5 years ago. And that's being reflected in an overall crisis in friendship. So people on average have fewer friends now than they did 2 decades ago. And having that inner circle isn't just a nice to have. It doesn't just make you feel better. It actually provides a very useful training ground for building social skills or for building those soft skills. And we've noticed that one of the key observations that employers at large share about Gen Z is their lack of social etiquette or workplace appropriateness. So, what are consumer brands doing about this? One innovation we have here from Riz, which is a dating app that uses AI to help socially anxious users navigate romantic interactions. So users embark on simulated dating scenarios with generated characters. They chat online to these AI personas and they get feedback on their responses and they're given an overall Riz score. The aim, of course, here is to boost dating confidence by creating these low pressure practice environments. And I should say a subscription to this platform costs users $20 per month. Now, you'll find plenty of suggestions as to how your brand might take this initiative forward into 2025. For instance, we've seen in the past 2 years countless examples of conversational AI being used to communicate tenderness and softness. We see studies show that more people actually prefer generated poetry over human written verse, which is perhaps concerning. But increasingly, they also trust AI to be more impartial than humans. So there is a real opportunity here for brands to harness AI to help users navigate kind of socially stressful situations in a really tender, caring way. And there's also a really interesting tension to explore here between the growing popularity of single person households and the pursuit of connection. How might social fabric solutions help to make solo living more social? And finally, our last trend today, loop life. Now, no guesses for no prizes, sorry, for guessing which issue ranks as the top global risk in 2024. Yes, of course, it's climate change, and this is actually the third consecutive year that has been the case, with 63% of experts and 45% of the general public ranking it in their top 5 concerns. But despite this eco-anxiety, a say-do gap remains. Loop Life is all about showing how AI can help consumers to actually make good on their intentions, so providing solutions that make circular living easier. After all, consumers have already seen how AI can make their lives easier in other ways, whether it's planning a trip or picking up a new language. Now that expectation is transferring to sustainable living. Now, of course, it would be completely remiss of me to not acknowledge AI's environmental impact. Now, while the electricity demand from data centers is rising, according to the International Energy Association, it still remains modest compared to other drivers like electric vehicles or air conditioning. Brands will, of course, need to be transparent about their AI footprint while rolling out solutions, loop life solutions that can really enable circular behaviors to stick at scale. Solutions like Faircardo. This is a browser plugin that helps people to find cheaper secondhand items online. So consumers can highlight a product they're interested in, and Faircardo uses computer vision and machine learning to scan that image and then find equivalent alternatives from over 50 secondhand shopping websites. And, Faircardo has partnered with some big hitters. I think eBay is perhaps the most prominent one. So they're doing very well. I think they had an injection of $1 million at the start of this year, and they earn revenue through commissions and fees for redirecting traffic. Now, of course, you'll find 5 other fantastic examples of this trend in action in the report across different industries, so do check them out. If you're looking to innovate in response to this trend, if we think about those opportunities, a good place to start is by looking into how your brand might be already contributing to green hindering. Now, that is a term used to describe practices where sustainability efforts are unintentionally undermined or obstructed. So things like having overly complicated recycling systems, maybe an inconvenient refill program, or products that are ecological, at least in theory, but simply aren't practical. So, paper straws or really bulky reusable bags. How is your brand or the brand you represent green hindering, and can AI provide the solution? at the crux of this trend is really a new sustainability equation. So for years, we've seen consumers weighing up the benefits of cost versus circularity, but that equation has a new component now, convenience. And AI solutions are enabling brands to optimize all three simultaneously. So the circular option can become both convenient and cost effective. And breathe. We're through 7 trends delivered in almost half an hour, with a handful of minutes left actually for some questions. Now, these are the 7 trends that we expect to see unfurl in the year ahead. Thank you for staying with me. I hope you've all submitted questions via the Q&A feature. Let's briefly open to questions. So Gemma, over to you for do you have any questions to send my way?
I'm having to select which ones to actually even read out to you because there's so many good ones. So let's
Mm.
see if we can get through a good few of them over the next few minutes. So one of the questions is, and apologies, I'm just going to read this straight out, but how would Trend Watching answer this question? When asked how to separate insights, trends from noise, noise could mean fads, but not only.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, we do have we have a kind of a theory around trends versus fads. For us, fads are what you do, trends really are how you do it. So the fads obviously are short term and the trends are longer term, they're more behavioral. How do we separate the noise from the valuable insights? Well, each of the innovations that you'll see on our platform, the innovations that you have seen in this presentation, you see in the report, have all been chosen because they fundamentally respond to consumers' basic human needs. So we have that framework of basic human needs. It's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And whenever we come into contact with a new business innovation, whether that is a product or a service, we are always fundamentally asking, okay, this might reflect a new macro trend, this shift in society. However, does it actually fundamentally address a basic human need? And as I showed you early on with that methodology diagram, it's only when brands are able to respond to macro trends and basic human needs that you actually create an innovation that is worth focusing on, that is worth us tracking, adding to our platform, filtering under a trend framework. Because obviously, unless you're actually catering to a basic human need, your product, your service simply won't be successful. It will have a really short shelf life. And that's often how we see the emergence of fad products or fad services. That's a great question.
Thank you, Robbie. Second question here we have is there any way of seeing how last year's trends predictions performed?
Yes, there is. So we haven't published a follow-up report. Obviously, we've been very invested in the research of our 2025 trend report. However, you can via our platform navigate to the trend that we published. So if you actually go to the 2024 trend report, all of our reports are interactive, so you can click through and it will take you to the relevant trend page. I would suggest going to the 2024 trend report, clicking on whichever trend takes your interest that you're keen to see whether it's kind of come to fruition or evolved. And you'll be able to see on that trend page the latest innovation. So you'll be able to see whether brands are still innovating in this space. There's also a reports tab. So you can then also see if we have published over the course of this year any industry update reports or snapshot reports that might have covered that trend. And you can then sort of see how the trend has evolved.
Fantastic. And that kind of leads me on to then the next question, which is also a really great question. Sorry, there's so many more coming through. So let's see if we can get through them. Next question is, what do you think is the biggest evolution you've seen from your 2024 trend report to the 2025 one?
Ooh, that's a very good question. That's a very good question. I feel like I have to refer back to see the trends all at once. Well, obviously we've seen so much evolution in the field of generative AI. I think when we published our 2024 trend report, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head all of those individual trends, but it wasn't until May of this year that we actually published a standalone generative AI report. Maybe you've read it. It's our AI times consumer futures report, in which we published, I believe, 5 or 6 specifically generative AI focused trends where we really are exclusively tracking evolutions in that particular niche. And I think that's also really come to bear in our 2025 trend report now, as opposed to us actually having kind of generative AI specific trends, you'll notice that generative AI is really an undercurrent. It kind of filters through pretty much all of the trends, even the trends that are responses to AI, such as Humanifesto, serendipity seekers. Both of those are really reflective of consumer pushback against AI or a world that feels increasingly algorithmic, but still they reflect the reality, which is this, growing presence of AI and the fact that it can sometimes feel a little overbearing or stifling. So I think probably that would be the biggest shift that I've noticed, or the biggest evolution in terms of how our trends have evolved. I think, generative AI being this flashpoint to being this kind of undercurrent to an entire batch of annual trends. Yeah.
Fantastic, Robbie. There's actually two questions. One's just come in, and also there was one earlier, and they kind of is quite similar. So I'm going to try and
Mm,
adapt both questions into one to see if
mm.
we can cover these two questions. So I'm just going to read the original and kind of see how we go along. But it says some of these trends and innovations significantly big shifts towards kind of R&D, which may need a lot of investment. How can nonprofits and smaller businesses do to make sure they're not left behind?
Yeah, interesting. Well, I guess the kind of theory with the evolution of well, when it comes to research and development, I mean, we, as I've said already, are huge advocates of AI, and I'm sure, or you maybe are already thinking about how you can use AI to actually quash some of those labor costs. And one of the kind of promises of AI is, of course, that as is true of Moore's law, like as it becomes smarter and more accessible, then those sorts of costs will diminish. In terms of research and development costs for nonprofits, I guess like my suggestion would actually be to probably reach out, because that I think is deserving of perhaps a meatier response than I would be able to give just off the cuff. I think that would actually need some significant research. But as a client joining this call, you obviously do have access to our Ask an Analyst service. So I would also recommend possibly using that. And one of our analysts will then be able to actually dive into that question, give it the depth that's required, and come back to you within 48 hours with a response.
No, that's
Um,
fantastic. And I know both individuals actually have submitted those questions. So thank you. I will reach out to you directly. There's so many other more questions, but like I said, now we're able to take them in. We'll actually get back to you on email. So Robbie will have to unfortunately round up the session.
Of course, yeah, and just one last suggestion before we close the call is, of course, do go to our Trend Baby section and do try out these fantastic tools. I saw some emoji responses when we first mentioned them, but they are super helpful and very interesting. We're of course always open to feedback. We'd love to hear from you. So finally, thank you so much for taking the time to jump through the report today, and please do enjoy reading it. On behalf of Gemma and myself, thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you on the platform.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day.